What's up, guys? We out here living in Boca Raton, South Florida. I am actually at home right now, just kind of hanging out. Today is a day that I actually have to do some catch-up things. I have to fix my boosted board, clean my house a little bit, do some travel planning, and just in general get things together because I'm doing a little bit more traveling, and then things kind of kick into high gear because August is always a fun month for me because you start to like track towards the end of the year, and that's when you really kind of start to see it. So there's a lot of that going on, but like I said, I wanted to tell a story about Kennedy Space Center. And Kennedy Space Center is actually someplace that's kind of fond to my heart. To tell you the full story, I got to go back a little bit. So back in high school, back in long time, 2099, around there, I started with a nerd club, robotics, right? It was part of FIRST, F-I-R-S-T, the acronym, based out of Boston, and they started doing competitions to high school to help nurture innovation and innovative thinking. And a part of that was actually doing competitions where you compete with robots. And one of those competitions, a regional competition, was at NASA Kennedy Space Center, which happens to be like a 4-hour drive from here. I would do that drive, I think it was like in the March time frame, kind of. I would do that drive, and then along the drive, I would always, I wouldn't drive. Sometimes we'd take the bus. I remember driving once. It was an interesting drive. But anyway, we would go to Kennedy Space Center, do the whole thing there. We'd spend like 3 days up there. And what I thought was interesting is that we did the whole competition, and I never really got to appreciate Kennedy Space Center. At the time, it was actually a busy space center. Now it's kind of retired, so you kind of get to appreciate it a lot more also. So I recently took a trip there. Monse, Artie, who you guys met in a previous video, myself and a friend also went to Kennedy Space Center. It was just kind of a random trip. I didn't expect to go, and I actually really enjoyed it because it's an interesting museum spread over thousands and thousands of acres in the middle of Florida. Maybe it might be hundreds of acres. Either or, it's pretty big. And Kennedy Space Center is where they launched and built the space shuttle. So Atlantis, Discovery, Columbia. Damn, I forgot the last one. What's the last one? And Challenger. That's the last one. One of the other most memorable things is the Saturn V building. The Saturn V building is where they used to hold this cool party for us. I remember seeing it for the first time. It's basically, let me show you the pictures. The Saturn V building is where they hold one of the rockets that went up into space and actually took people to space and to the moon. The Saturn V spaceship was actually memorialized and put into this building, or really the building was built around it if you look at the size of this thing, because it's huge. Funny story, I actually broke my first bone on one of these pillars that hold up this thing. It was during the party, and I was throwing a frisbee and not looking, and smack, I broke this one. I broke this one. It was my right. Definitely remember it was my right. I couldn't write. So that's the fond memory of Kennedy Space Center. So always seeing this place is pretty cool. And seeing it like 10 years later after I haven't been here in a long time is even awesomer, even better, more awesome. Like, here's an example. I grew up during that time watching the space shuttle launch from my house. You just look north and you just time it right, and you could see Kennedy Space Center and a space launch going up into the sky and disappearing into space, which as a kid was the coolest thing. I was into rockets, into astronauts, into space, into robotics. So that stuff was mesmerizing, and for it to be so close and to be going there was awesome. So what made this even more memorable of a trip was when I got there, it turned out they put the entire Atlantis space shuttle also into a ship, which was one of the rockets that flew into space to the International Space Station to do service on like the Hubble telescope as well. So that was actually put into a building, the real thing. And the presentation they did was amazing, and just seeing it above you, over your head, is insanely cool. And that made it so memorable, because you see this thing and now you actually see it up close. Like when they were launching it, you couldn't really see it up close because it's on a launch pad or in a service station getting fixed and updated for the next launch. So that was pretty amazing. Other than that, it was freaking boiling hot. If you do this, I would suggest you do the bus tour. Do the long bus tour if you can afford it and kind of swing it. We did a 4-hour bus tour. You see everything via bus. Because the campus is so large, you want to see all the different launch pads. They have 45 miles of pristine, untouched beach in Kennedy Space Center. And to see it is insane. There's like so much wildlife around there. I couldn't believe it. The minute you get off I-95, you start just seeing so much wildlife, like birds and stuff. I remember back in high school, the first time I drove, I actually hit a bird driving down that road because there's like animals. There's a lot of animals there. You got to take your time. So that was actually pretty cool also. To wrap things up though, we went to Kennedy Space Center after we got done checking out Atlantis. We were pretty tired. It was like 7 o'clock. We spent a good day there. After doing the bus, it does a couple stops and then you kind of carry on. It was freaking awesome. I had a great time. I would recommend it. Doing a full family could get kind of expensive. That's one thing I realized as like an adult now with resources. Like I just had to cover myself, but it is kind of expensive. I think a ticket was $50, $60. And then of course food and stuff is where it really adds up. But it was nice being older and kind of going crazy in the souvenir shop. I got a sticker over there, or sorry, a badge, some other like stupid stuff that when I was a kid I couldn't afford. So it was kind of cool to get. Almost bought one of those cool spaceman jackets. Thanks for kind of listening to this story today. If you're ever in Florida, or really any of the NASA centers, I think you can do tours. I would suggest going to a Kennedy Space Center tour. Kennedy's my favorite. It's like a museum for space. You can actually meet astronauts there also. I didn't do that. Hopefully you get a chance to check it out. Thanks, and have a good one. Bye.